Overwhelmingly approved $40 billion in aid for Ukraine, making it the largest foreign aid package passed by Congress in at least 2 decades. The 86-11 vote, with all the nays coming from Republicans, reflects the overwhelming bipartisan support for the massive assistance. The package, which includes money for advanced weapon systems and general economic aid, brings the total U.S. investment in Ukraine to around $54 billion. President Biden applauded the passage of the bill, saying it sends a, quote, clear bipartisan message to the world that the people of the United States stand together with the brave people of Ukraine. He's expected to quickly sign it into law. Ahead of the vote, Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell made another strong push for its passage, saying, quote, anyone concerned about the cost should consider the much larger cost should Ukraine lose.
David Ignatius, yesterday, the New York Times lead editorial suggested that this war was about to get more complicated and Americans weren't ready for it. I'm curious, what are your thoughts about where this $40 billion package puts us and where the United States' increased commitment puts America?
So, Joe, I think that the Times is right that the end of the war is complicated. It's hard to see how this war will end. Russia remains all in, at least in eastern Ukraine. Ukrainians are more convinced than ever that they can drive Russian forces out of their country. The interest that Ukrainian President Zelensky had in a negotiated settlement 2 months ago and after the first month of the war seems much less. So I think the end game is hard to understand. What's clear is that the United States is fully behind Ukraine in this bipartisan show of support. President Biden can go abroad as he is on his trip this week to Asia and say with confidence the United States, both parties stand together in supporting our ally, can talk about America's reliability more convincingly than he sometimes is able to, given our political divisions at home. But I think the simple point, Joe, is that we are pumping weapons into Ukraine in an unprecedented way. The Russians do not seem to be pulling back in the areas they've decided they're going to try to dominate. They're coming at the Donbass, at the southeast as hard as ever. The big fight, if it happens, is going to be on the Black Sea coast for Odessa. We don't know yet whether the Russians think they're strong enough to go after that, but a lot of very heavy fighting ahead.
While the fighting continues inside Ukraine, NATO is only getting stronger. Finland and Sweden's push to join NATO has President Biden's full support. He backed the two countries strongly yesterday after meeting with the Finnish president and the Swedish prime minister at the White House.
Let no one make a mistake of the meaning of this historic day. In the face of aggression, NATO has not grown weaker or more divided. It has grown stronger, more united. With Finland and Sweden's decision to request membership in NATO, it'll be enhanced for all time. Standing together today, we reject the bloody creed that might makes right, and we declare more powerful creed. All for one and one for all.
Finland and Sweden have near unanimous support for NATO membership from Western allies. Turkey is the only country that has objected. The Turkish government has accused Finland and Sweden of supporting a group it considers to be Kurdish terrorists. At the White House yesterday, Finland's president said his country condemns terrorism in all its forms and is open to discussing all the concerns Turkey may have. Jonathan Lear, Turkey exercising a little leverage there perhaps, but we were on the air yesterday talking about this when
This is absolutely historically unprecedented. This is something that I don't think some of the deepest, longest professional politicians on an international scale could have ever imagined that was going to take place. If you'd have told them that this was going to happen, as much as I guess 4 months ago, 5 months ago, they would have looked at you and they'd have said, good luck in that. This has unraveled itself openly right before our eyes of the mass NATO alliances that has come together to defeat and overcome an old enemy that, yes, they have been subjected to and had to deal with for, I guess, the past 75 longer years since World War II and even beyond. This is absolutely historical in the sense of the historians need to really, really pay very close attention to these moves on the board, kind of like a chess game that's being played right now, because even though it's been prophesied for these events to have occurred, it has always been hesitant upon the politicians of the Western world of believing that it would actually occur. Well, now it is occurring. Please listen.
Finland and Sweden, the leaders of those two countries, visited with President Biden, and I think General McCaffrey, called it monumental to see those two nations joining NATO, something that perhaps even 2 or 3 months ago was something Vladimir Putin certainly didn't imagine.
No, Sir Vladimir Putin wanted to make history with this invasion, and he has, but just not the kind that he wanted. I was in the Rose Garden yesterday when the president made those remarks, and it was such a show of force and of support. The president leaning with every image and tool he could to say, hey, this is what we want. Sweden and Finland should be in, and U.S. officials have told me repeatedly, yes, there's some sort of deal to be struck with Turkey, but they do anticipate that Turkey will eventually let go of their objections, potentially even in time for the next NATO summit, which is scheduled in late June in Madrid. Katty K, it is indeed monumental, and it's reshaping Europe. And we have seen, I know there are some questions and concerns about whether the alliance can stay so closely knit if this war extends for months or years, which some think it could. But just talk to us right now, if you will, about the state of play in Europe and how it has rallied together to support Kyiv against Moscow.
Yeah, Sweden and Finland joining NATO is the most, I think it's the most profound indication that Europe has gone through a radical shift since the invasion of Ukraine. You had Germany deciding to drop the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. You had Germany deciding to up its defense budget by 2% to 2% of GDP. Both very big steps. But Sweden and Finland joining NATO fundamentally reshapes the alliance and reshapes European security and a sense of the West being very in opposition to Russia's invasion. Russia's NATO's border with Russia overnight. Finland had an 800-mile border with Russia. It makes NATO right up against Russia. They are very close to the areas of Russia where there are nuclear submarines. Sweden has a very effective navy. Finland has very good military. Now, when I've spoken to Finns about this, they've said this is not because we feel anxious about Russia, it's because we want to prevent further aggression. It's this idea of NATO as a defensive organization. But make no mistake about it, Russia is going to see this as an aggressive move. And it is. It's Europe flexing its muscle and uniting even further in the face of Russian aggression.
Well, and David Ignatius, put it in context for us, because we've talked, of course, for a month now about Germany, talking about the biggest expansion of their military budget since 1945. We've talked about the fact that they're going to have a military budget larger than Russia's when they follow through on those commitments. We've talked about Switzerland, who was neutral during World War II, even in the face of Nazi horrors, now picking sides. But this latest development, Finland and Sweden, as Admiral Stavridis says, it turns the Baltic Sea into a NATO lake. And you just look at the map, and you look at Estonia and Latvia and Lithuania on the southern side of the Baltic, and then you look at Finland and Sweden. It really is extraordinary.
Unbelievable. it pretty well speaks volumes towards who truly is the powerhouse whenever it comes to seeing people unite this way militarily over an aggressor, the hostiles that are acting the way that they're acting against the Ukrainians right now. That, believe it or not, Poland, Lithuanian, Estonian, um, Romanian, all those areas that at one time that used to be known as the old Yugoslavia's old Russian territory are frightened to death right now that that if Russia succeeds in taking over Ukraine, it's going to continue on towards pushing forward, even possibly all the way to Spain. I know that sounds radical. You know, one good thing about it is that Russia's never dipped off into the area that I know of down here in Africa, but even off into this area right here towards Turkey, and I forgot the name of those other two countries right there, but even those areas at one time used to be mandated by some sort of old Soviet Union going way back, probably, I don't know, 1,000 years ago, that at one time was considered that territory. It's just absolutely amazing that we're seeing this powerhouse come out the way that it is. And, you know, whenever I predicted that the war was going to occur, in regards towards predicting that the war was going to occur, in regards towards Russia, Putin having a burr under his saddle, thinking that he could do something differently with the Ukrainians, that my brother and I actually took great notice of in 2015, that was publicized here in America very small. That we didn't get a whole lot of education from our media players here in America pertaining to the extent of everything that was going on over there in Ukraine during 2015, whenever all that busted loose. Even since 2015, I had no idea that there was still missiles and a war going on between Ukrainian and the Russians over there, towards them constantly bombarding each other back and forth, towards seeing who was going to be able to throw out the most licks towards each other that was going to damage each other. That was not publicized that I'm aware of, that those events were still taking place since 2015. The way that I understand it today, that the war actually never stopped in 2015, and of course we didn't see near the invasion that we're seeing today. But whenever you line up 200 to almost 200,000 troops, tanks, and people around Ukraine, thinking that it was some sort of a military exercise, that was absolutely preposterous for anybody to even begin to accept that he was going to spend that kind of money and energy and time around Ukraine just for an exercise. It's remarkable, to say the least, of how that the United Nations have united in becoming that much stronger. And I hope and I pray that the people in Russia can see this and identify this, that they have basically got a madman at the helm. They have got somebody at the helm that has made a very crucial mistake in thinking that he was going to be able to overcome his losses by going in and forcing people into overtaking their lives and overtaking their property. I hope now that the good people in Russia, and there are good people in Russia, they're not all brainwashed, they're not all stonewalled. I do hope that now that they can open up their eyes and identifying the fact that their leader, their fearless leader, Poisonous Putin, is soon to lead them down a path of remorse and destruction and harm and hurt that their citizens in that country has not experienced or seen since World War II. Unbelievable that some knucklehead like President Putin, that claims to be one of the bad guys on the block because he was associated with the KGB back years ago. Unbelievable that somebody like that would make this type of an error in doing this. Once more, Vice President, our President, we all spoke up against this. We all said that there was going to be dire, severe consequences if Russia pursued this. And to be quite honest with you, I don't, since the ground has shifted, I really don't know how badly the ground has actually shifted. Of course, over here in America, we see the things that we're seeing pertaining to the high fuel prices and the high grocery prices and everything else. The inflation has really skyrocketed just within the past few months. But I've talked to some of the people from Germany. I've talked to some people from Turkey that's over here in the United States. Just coincidentally, I bumped into these people. The people in Germany told me that one of her nephews accused somebody, I don't know who it was, of being part of the Nazism, Stalin swastika police force, and in doing so, her nephew spent about 11 months in jail, in prison, simply because he spoke up against authority figure of this sort. The people in Turkey, they are suffering. You think that fuel prices has gone outlandishly high here, you should go to Italy, you should go to Slovenia, you should go to some of these other countries, France, Spain. It's just unbelievable. Even the United Kingdom right now is suffering tremendously pertaining to the prices that has just escalated unbelievably, not only with the petroleum oil, but also with everything else. I contribute a lot of this because of COVID, that COVID basically put everybody in a neutral mode for about 2 years, and things was not being handled appropriately and effectively and efficiently during COVID pertaining to supply issues. And now all of a sudden, since this has erupted over in Ukraine, it has added insult to misery to the degree that now we're seeing just exactly how those assets are really strained under the pretense of a madman, I guess, that was going to turn himself into another Adolf Hitler, of trying to overcome and take over the rest of those countries by force, by thinking that he was going to be able to dictate and keep them under his thumb the same way that he has his own civilians for the past, I guess, several decades ago. Even Ronald Reagan said that it was an evil, evil empire before he left office, and to think that now we're actually seeing the development of the things that Ronald Reagan was talking about then. Now it's remarkable. It's unbelievable in a way to think that, my God, these people over there pertaining to their military government really supported somebody that was this far out of the loop. It's asinizing to think somebody in the 21st century really and truly thought that he was going to be able to pull this off without being unscathed.
We write it reframes the entire map strategically. Like very few things we've seen other than the massive changes in 1989.
So, Joe, I think it's fair to say that there has been a fundamental shift in the balance of power in Europe and, by extension, globally. Russia, with a blunder that historians will study for decades, has walked into a war that it cannot win. How it ends, we don't know, but we can be pretty certain that Russia won't achieve its goals. It has produced a degree of unity that several years ago would have been a fantasy. If I had told you that NATO would be roaring ahead and Germans would be committed to ever greater defense spending and that these Nordic countries would be joining, you would have laughed at me. You would have said, much as French President Macron did several years ago, NATO's brain dead. Well, it's not brain dead anymore. It is a powerful alliance. And that's resonating around the world. Talking to people in Asia the last several days, as they prepared for President Biden's visit, I was struck by the way in which they too are influenced both by Russia's aggression, by China's willingness to condone Russia's aggression, and by this shift in the balance of power. The United States always wants to say the U.S. and its partnerships are the strongest force for ordering the world. Sometimes that just isn't believable. Right now, in the aftermath of Ukraine, with this extraordinary unity, new members joining NATO, it is credible, and people are listening.
It is credible because it's laughing. I remember several years ago, Foreign Affairs had on its cover, Mika, the rise of the autocrats. And I said, and I joked with Richard Haas. I said, this is like a Sports Illustrated jinx. You put these autocrats on the cover and talk about this is the future of world politics. You have just jinxed autocrats. I didn't know how long it was going to take. But I want to follow up with what David and Caddy just said. David's exactly right. You have Russia, who is as bankrupt as they could be, as far as politically bankrupt across the globe. You have China, who's kept themselves in a terrible position, who's weaker now than they've been in some time, who has a disastrous COVID policy, who has disastrous internal policies. And then you look at Europe, and Caddy said something we really should focus on. A continent that has lived in the shadow of 2 world wars in the 20th century, lived in the shadow of over 100 million people dying in those 2 world wars, lived in the shadow of a Holocaust, lived in the shadow of the horrors of Stalin, of Hitler. This is a continent now, for the first time since World War II, they are flexing their muscle. And as we've said here on this show, for quite some time, we worry all the time about the rise of the autocrats, the rise of China, Russia. Combine America's GDP and the EU's GDP and Great Britain's GDP, and you've got a GDP of $40 trillion a year compared to about $1.4 trillion a year with Russia, and half of that in China.
Well,
it does speak volumes about our democratic society that is growing in leaps and bounds even as we speak in places as remotely as Africa or India. It does speak volumes about how that the general public is changing to the degree that they don't want to be robots. They don't want to be slaves. They don't want to be enslaved to a ruler like this. I think a lot of this has been on account of the internet, towards smartphone technology, towards other countries that get to view the various things that we talk about and do over here in the Western world, because they do look at us towards us being the beacon of democracy, and they can now visually tune in on our ball games. They can visually tune in on our political arenas. They can tune in on our local, state, as well as federal governments, towards how that we enact various laws, how we bring in and out various concepts pertaining to the will of the people that vote upon various things. They look upon how that we've got, and I say this mildly, ordinarily, we have really, really nice roads in comparison to a great deal of the third world countries. We have nice lakes, we have nice parks, we have nice hospitals, we have modified and fine tuned a lot of our factories to the point that we're not major polluters in the world. We have modified our automobiles to the point of putting catalytic converters and etc. on automobiles to the point of modifying the carbons that we're putting out into the world. I think that, believe it or not, as badly as a lot of people would like to think that America is, this is probably one of our shining beacon moments as a democracy of standing up and seeing where other people are weighing in on the same side that we're on towards saying what poisonous Putin is engaged up into with the Ukrainian people is as wrong can get. And if that doesn't hit you like falling off of a log, then obviously something is wrong with that person's concept of of looking at things in the proper form. Because anytime you want to put somebody, subject people under your rule by death and destruction in today's society, people are waking up to this, and they're saying this is not right. This is wrong. Especially whenever you start to hit the world in their own pocketbooks, to the point that now people are realizing, oh my God, fuel is not only going up, but groceries is going up, and rent's going up, and cars is going up, and all the things that they have been adapted to pertaining to the pleasures of the Western world are now suddenly skyrocketing. It's unbelievable in a way, but in another way, we knew that the prophecies was going to come true in regards towards what it speaks of, towards it being as the noise of thunder in these alliance movements that's now occurring all over the world. Now, I'm not saying that everybody's going to get on board with the American Western culture pertaining to voting in and out. And I'm going to say one of your lead players that won't is going to be Saudi Arabia and places like Afghanistan that still wants to rule their people like they're slaves. As a matter of fact, I seen some kind of article the other day on Afghanistan where they still do not want none of their women to show their faces. They got to wear veils and they got to wear long dresses, in which I understand the concept. Don't get me wrong. I understand the concept pertaining to wearing provocative clothing, how a lot of whores, especially over here in America, I don't know how, well, it's that way over in Spain and other places too, to where they basically just flaunt their sexuality in front of you, to the point that, to me, it's a invasion of privacy, because if I don't want to see that, then I should have a right to not to have to look at that, just like if they have the right to want to display themselves that way. But we're beginning to understand that this type of movement that even the Taliban is putting their own people under is wrong. Now, one of the commentators that was producing this show asked one of the leaders, one of the primary leaders over in the Taliban, what does this mean if women can't be seen, if they can't be heard? And his response was, they still have their duties and they're still going to perform them regardless. In other words, they're enslaved to us. We'll treat them the way we feel like that they should be treated. If we want to feed them, we'll feed them. If we want to beat them, we'll beat them. If we want to rape them, we'll rape them. These countries that are still performing this way, and there's many of them, especially over in the Middle East, that want to dominate their citizens this way, are as barbaric and as cold-hearted and as cruel as any human being or monster has ever projected itself up onto the planet. There's no doubt that the women in certain areas, including the United States, go way overboard in wearing their provocative material that causes a stumbling block for a lot of Christians that has these type of weaknesses that fall into prey by these women that knows that they have a good looking body and that want to flaunt themselves in front of various people, but then a lot of them will turn it around because it's nothing more than an entrapment by saying, oh, you're groping at me, oh, you're lusting at me, or oh, you tried to rape me. You know, whenever you're gonna present yourself as a whore, as a Jezebel, there's probably a pretty good chance you're going to be treated as one. I mean, it even talks about the Jezebels and the whores in the Bible going all the way back into the times of Moses. I mean, Moses and Samson. It talks about the Jezebels and the Egyptians that wanted to put on the makeup and put on their eye mascara, and they had a way of enticing the men into their bedrooms. Don't think that whoring around pertaining to prostitution is something that just recently got developed. This is one of the oldest, I repeat, this is one of the oldest occupations in the world of how that women and men, I ain't just going to put it off on women, want to sexually entice other people to get favors or to get paid or to get whatever that they want. This isn't nothing new. But what is new is to see the alliances come together the way that has been predicted for them to come together, because the people have now awakened. The sleeping giant has awakened all these other countries with their internet services and their smartphone technologies towards understanding that there is a better way for a society to be productive and fair, and that way is not the way of the Taliban. That way is not the way of the Saudi Arabians. That way is not the way of the Chinese or the way of the Russians or other countries like Honduras and Colombia that wants to enslave their people with drugs or keep them seduced to the point that they really don't know who they are and what they are. They basically just use them as sex slaves and throw drugs, basically weaponize drugs to the point that they use drugs to be able to get their way of what they want and what they don't want in those countries. It's time for society, for the Homo sapiens society here upon to the planet that most people call planet Earth. It's time for people to wake up, and you know what? I think that finally that occurrence is now being displayed openly in front of everybody of what's happening towards it was as the noise of thunder. One of the beasts in the heavenly kingdom looked down upon to the Homo sapien planet and cried out to the rest of the embodiment in heaven, in the heavenly kingdom, come and see.
Strength of these partnerships and these alliances is paramount, and that has been proven. But another aspect of this, which we'll get to, I'm sure, is how this war is going to have an impact on the U.S. economy, the global economy, and that's going to pose problems, I would predict, for Democrats and for President Biden politically, because it's going to be...
I hate to clarify something, but it already is. It ain't going to. It already is affecting world economies.
Explain to the American voter why all of this investment abroad, investment in these alliances is that important when they can't get through the week. Well, that's going to be the other challenge.
And the dangers in something like this being transfigurated from one thing to another is that you'll always have your power players out there that does have a pocket full of money that want to take advantage of people's lives by basically doing just exactly what I said a while ago, by weaponizing these efforts to the point that now they make demands on people's lives that are very, very cruel and are very, very unsafe, and is very, very wrong. It is wrong for a person that has a great deal of money saved up, that was fortunate enough to have money, that uses that money as a power tool, or uses it, weaponizes that power to be able to obstruct people's own identities towards what those people should be a part of in a fair, open society. These things are going to occur on the front end probably a whole lot more worse than they are the back end. But you got right now girls that's 11, 12, 13 years old that are being taken advantage of over in Poland and other countries because the availability is there. The temptation is now there because these people, yeah, they opened up their doors. Yeah, they said, come on in. But at the same time, they're expecting something in return. And I guarantee you it's going to be the children or the women, the weak, that are going to wind up having to take back seat to their own privileges or their own rights, that people are going to take advantage of these situations that Putin has basically brought up into society. And that's the damnedest thing about it, is that this, as far as I'm concerned, poisonous Putin, he has damned his own country. He has damned his own government. He has damned his own family. He has damned himself in doing what that he has done. And it's just a matter of time before the rest of the world sees this in the same set of eyes of what I'm talking about, because this will not go unpunished. Even if he was to surrender right now and go home, there would still be courts pertaining of war crime violations, and he himself, Putin, would go to jail for the rest of his life. He will never be allowed to leave the Kremlin, never be allowed to leave Russia again, because if he does, they'll nab him up whatever area that he goes to. He's a marked man from day one, and he will never have the same privileges pertaining to going and coming and doing things as at one time that he used to have. And the bad thing about it is neither will a lot of his generals and a lot of those that we know that are guilty of these war crimes. Don't think for a second that these other countries aren't looking at these people and analyzing their pictures and knowing who that they are, because they do. We live in the 21st century, my God. Everybody and their brother's got a freaking camera. The internet is all over the world. It ain't just in one part of the world pertaining to America. It's all over the world. I'm absolutely amazed because I have so many people on my Facebook page in other countries. And I hope that a lot of times whenever I say like, you down at the bottom left-hand corner, you hit like whenever somebody's giving you a video. And I hope to God a lot of times that I'm pressing the right button by saying like. And sometimes if I got this feeling that whatever that they're saying, because I can't understand all these different languages and all these different cultures. I like their clothing. I like their colors. I like the landscape pertaining to the geographical settings and behind where they live and what they're a part of. But a lot of these people that are saying what they're saying, that I really have a bad feeling about saying, about what they're saying, I don't hit like. And I hope and pray to God that I'm not hitting like whenever somebody is down in America or bashing our American military. I hope to God that I'm not mashing like whenever different various countries out there are going against our ethics and against our rule of policies here in America. But I guess that's the chance you have to take whenever you're experiencing other cultures, other families. They'll show you their babies, they'll show you their families, they'll show you their inventions, And then of course you get these other crazy freaking videos. Amazing how that people has made horrible mistakes either on the road or maybe they're in the house, they're at the house and they're on a ladder. But some of the most bizarre events, and I know it has to be breaking bones and hurting people, especially those on the road that get run off the road, that somebody in behind them had a video going and somebody has compiled all that information together, even though they may be speaking in a totally different language and they may be driving down the road on the left hand side. You can still get a pretty basic idea towards what's happening, towards people being engaged in some sort of a harmful act, regardless whether it's intentional or not intentional. And it's just absolutely bizarre to think that we can sit and watch these things today, to where 25, 30, 40 years ago, we couldn't see these things. Not on the level that we see them today. Not on the level that we see them today. It's kind of like the media back whenever I was growing up. Long about 12 o'clock, they would sing the Star Spangled Banner and the TV would go off. CBS, ABC, NBC, our major networks here in America, they would go off and you would see that little 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 thing, and then your TV go black. And it stayed black for about 4 or 5 hours, and then it come back on long about 5 or 6 o'clock, and that's whenever you was back you was back plugged into the world towards understanding the things that was going on in other states and in other parts of the communities that you wasn't there to be able to witness yourself. Today, we have so many different medias that's promoting different channels out there. If you flip through your stations, my God, I can probably hit, I'm going to say 25 or 30 at least, maybe more, just off the circuitry that I got off of Dish Network. Direct Dish, Direct TV. I can hit at least 40, 25, 30, 40 different news entities, and some of them don't even speak our language. Most of them do, that's being transferred over here to America, but you're still being a witness to events that's going on in other parts of the country that 40 years ago would have been absolutely impossible for us to have known about the things that was going on with them, just like it would have been impossible for them to have known about the things that was going on with us. I think this is Poisonous Putin's biggest mistake, that he didn't realize how entangled that the world is actually of today. Because anybody that thinks that they're going to be able to walk all over people and do what he's doing, and people ain't going to record it, and people ain't going to recognize it, and people ain't going to document these things, to think that he thought that he was going to do this underhandedly and the world not take notice in what that he was doing, is absolutely bizarre in today's 21st century. It's absolutely bizarre. He could have got away with this in the early 1900s. Because back then, satellite and communications wasn't near like they are today. A matter of fact, if you'll go back another 100 years, 200 years from now, I'm just going to use this as an example that a lot of people know about. I think it was the Titanic that went down, and it took people in the United States, some of them, weeks before they got news that the Titanic had blundered down into the bottom part of the ocean. And of course, if you'll go before that era, another 100 or 200 years before that, sometimes it took months, if not years, before you heard of something major that went on in another country. During our Civil War, communications was good enough, even in the 1800s, that King George III and other monarchies around the world was paying very, very close attention towards what was going on here in America pertaining to our Civil War. Not everybody knowed what was going on, but there was a certain level of high anarchies that at that time knew just exactly that we was fighting amongst ourselves left and right over here for the things that we believe in today. They knew that these occurrences was happening. They had the watchful eye in the sky per se, and they, of course, they transferred information back then a little differently than they do today, towards it being basically on paper or telegraphs. But the point that I'm trying to make is this: I think Putin actually thought that he was in a bubble, that he was on an island, and that he could do what he wanted to do to the Ukrainian people, and the world wasn't going to pay close attention to what he was doing. I really, truly believe that he was that naive and not being able to figure out that, my God, if I do something like this, this is going to take center stage with social media, and everybody and their brother's going to know what's going on. So sad how these dictators think. Even in the 21st century.
And yet you look at Republicans and Democrats alike. I think they've wisely made the decision that they cannot allow Vladimir Putin to win, because the cost of that will be far greater.
I think over time the challenge comes. Coming up on Morning Joe, Russia has renewed its offensive in Ukraine's eastern Donbass region. Retired Army General David Petraeus joins us with his expert military analysis. Plus, the head of the FDA gets pressed on the question millions of parents want to know the answer to: when will baby formula be back on store shelves? What he had to say to lawmakers on Capitol Hill yesterday. Also,
I don't know if anybody's ever thought of this. I've already discussed it with a family or two in regards towards this formula milk. I guarantee you, if you really got down to the nitty gritty towards how the Amish people and the Mennonite people provide necessities for their newborns, they would probably have some really, really old type remedies that to this day they still practice and use, because those people don't really rely upon the modern day society like we do today in the Western world. They still live primitive in those extreme situations, and I guarantee you could probably look up some of the Indian culture formulas, or some of the formulas pertaining to the Amish or the Mennonite people, of what that they do. I don't know if they boil goat's milk, or maybe they use some sort of high energy. Maybe they do something, but I guarantee you there's solutions out there in being able to compromise on most children if you do not have adequate formula for those children. Now, there's no doubt there's children out there that are so sensitive, that already have so many different birth defects, that there's no way that you can compromise towards that child, because that child has to be given, that infant has to be given that particular formula, because if they don't, they break out, they swell up, they have diarrhea, extreme diarrhea. I mean, there's all kinds of symptoms that probably, I'm going to say 3 out of 10 infants have to now be pampered because of extreme dire situations. But those other 7 out of 10, you could probably use some sort of an ancient formula that either the Indians or the Mayans or the Mennonites or the Amish people use today, that basically works. Now, does FDA want people to know this? Probably not. Does your local retailer down the road here, including Walmart, do they want you to know that there's different avenues that women can take that would basically accommodate their young infants in dire situations like this? Probably not, because it would be a conflict of interest. That's just like all these petroleum stations. How come there isn't an electrical box to where people can pull up, plug their car up that's traveling across the United States at any, let's just say a Pilot truck stop. How come Pilot hasn't engineered some sort of electrical station for all these electrical cars? That way you'll know whenever you get on the road that, hey, once your energy level gets down pretty low, just like your gas, you need to pull over and give yourself a quick boost pertaining to your electricity car, your battery powered car. How come they haven't done this? Because it's a conflict of interest. Why would petroleum want to start giving away electricity to various citizens when they can sell petroleum and make money off of it? I don't know if our Congress has figured that out yet or not, but they're going to have to come up with some sort of a program to offer some sort of a reward system of these major truck stops and these major gas stations, including Walmarts, because as far as I know, I've not pulled up at a Walmart here in the state of Tennessee and seen where there was a charging station nowhere available. And I go to about 6 or 7 different Walmarts in about 6 or 7 different counties. I have yet to see an electrical charging station at any of their Murphy gas stations. Why is that? You think it may be because we're just blowing smoke whenever we're really talking about alternative energy? There's going to have to be some sort of a program by the government if we're going to push this thing towards offering some sort of incentive with these gas stations that's going to be able to do this, because it's going to cost them a certain amount of money to produce this energy. I mean, electricity costs money. Besides that, I don't even know for sure if we got the proper necessities in the ground pertaining to various minerals that make these Nikonic batteries that stay charged for X amount of hours or X amount of days. They're the batteries are very, very expensive to build. And I don't know that we have the iron ore and the zinc and everything else to be able to build sufficient, go over into an alternative source of energy pertaining to battery power cars. I don't know that we have the capability of doing that. A lot of these raw materials is liable to wind up having to come from different countries because we don't have the raw materials here to build these lithium batteries. They talk the talk about wanting to do something, but people don't sit down and figure out the goal or a plan of action towards how we're going to get there. Just like the formula milk. I have yet to hear any type of news agency that wants to get out there and tell women, young girls, hey, if all else fails, you can do this, 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 and this, and 7 out of 10 is going to work. There's going to be a few of them that's not, but 7 out of 10 will work because other cultures, other primitive tribes, the Mennonites, the Indians, the Amish people, they do it today, and it works. It makes little Johnny get fat. It makes little Sally grow. And of course, after they get a certain age, then you can divert them over to whole milk, and then eventually convert them over to eating actual food, getting their protein that way. It's a runaway train. It's a runaway train in America pertaining to solutions to our problems. And the sad thing about it is whenever somebody like me stands up and wants to help people in various issues, in which, don't get me wrong, I don't pretend to be an expert whenever it comes to raising infants. Matter of fact, I probably graded out at about an F whenever it comes to me being a good daddy and washing diapers and burping children and doing all the above whenever it comes to raising infants. I was probably one of the worst. Matter of fact, I know I was. But there's a lot of women out there that, as far as I'm concerned, they deserve an A plus in their motherhood towards the way that they protect their children.
Also this morning, a Republican congressman acknowledges letting people.
Let's go forward here.
Central to
Let's back up real quick. Something caught my eye. Right there.
And finding out for yourself. Were you born to follow a path, or were you born for...
See that right there?
Trey.
Well, I lost it.
The only way you're
Oh,
ever
here it
going to
is.
know what you're made of is by heading into the big, wild, raging soap.
You see that right there? Of course, that's just a commercial that's got an icon. It looks like a phone icon with Jeep on it with a cord coming out of it. But that's the very thing that I'm talking about that hasn't been looked upon in a very, very serious manner towards how are we going to get all these petroleum stations where people get petroleum. Are we going to start suddenly opening up power stations to where people can just pull in and only get electricity at various power stations that don't sell petroleum? Is that what we're going to do? We're going to start having power stations competing with gas stations? Is that what we're going to do? Or are we going to provide the same resources for people that has an electrical battery power car, the same as the petroleum people do? That way, whenever they pull up to get power, they can get their power at the same place where they basically get their gas. Somebody is going to have to put a little bit of thought into these issues if we are going to transfigurate the way that we generate our power, how much petroleum that we use. There's no doubt there's going to be certain automobiles out there, as well as the truck driving industry, that requires that type of power. Farmers, probably airplanes, I don't know, big boats, I don't know, that probably ain't going to be able to convert over to alternative energy. But those that can, are we really putting our minds to the paper in how that we're going to go about doing this? Are we going to mandate for all the pilots? I'm going to use the word pilot. I don't mean to be picking on pilot here, because there's many others out there that are just as big, if not bigger than pilot. Are we going to mandate and tell them that they have to have a electrical battery power station hooked up and providing for the public in a certain amount of days? Let's say in 90 days they have to have this. I mean, you can't just go at something half-cocked. If you're going to do something, you got to sit down on pencil and paper and start out towards, all right, we're going to have this. These are necessities. It's kind of like going through a grocery list. We're going to have this, 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 and this if we're going to make this work. Has anybody really sat down and said that to any of our government officials pertaining to this? This is going to be a big move for our environment. And a matter of fact, I feel like personally that this is going to be our life-saving move if we're going to combat the damage that we have already done to our environment. This is going to be something that we're going to have to basically all take a part of. And yes, that includes Saudi Arabia, that has one of the biggest oil markets on the planet. You're going to have some of these petroleum people that aren't going to want to put an electrical power station on to their premises. So it's going to have to be mandated by the government that if they do not provide this type of service, then they're going to have to take a possible a hit towards being fined or something. If you're going to put this out there, you're going to have to make it work. It's kind of like the natural gas industry over in Oklahoma. They've got natural gas industry pumping stations that you can pump natural gas into your automobile and save like $1 a gallon, and your automobile can be converted over, even electrical automobile can be converted over in burning natural gas versus regular gas, but you gotta have it convenient for the general public. And guess what? Out in Oklahoma, just about everywhere there is natural gas stations to where you can pull up at a natural gas station and fill your automobile up just like you can at a regular petroleum station. There's only one around here that I'm aware of, and that's in Trenton, Tennessee. There may be one in Union City. I don't think there's no other ones around here. There's like only 2 or 3 within like a give or take about 100-mile radius either way. There's like maybe 2 or 3 natural gas petroleum stations in this area. Why is that? It's because natural gas petroleum burning automobiles aren't predominant in this area. Now, if we was out in Oklahoma where everybody and their brother has converted their car over, I think it costs as little as like $300 or $400 to convert your automobile over, of it being a gas burning car to a natural gas burning car. If we was in Oklahoma, I'm sure putting up a natural gas petroleum availability station would be a necessity. But out here in Tennessee, Northwest Tennessee, they don't look at it as it being a necessity. That's the point that I'm trying to make. If you're going to put people in battery power cars, and families are going to travel from the East Coast to the West Coast, to the northern border, to the southern border, to basically from sea to shining sea, the government is going to have to introduce some sort of program to where it is profitable, or it can also be damaging to that particular industry if they don't participate in this alternative energy source. That's my opinion about it. Once more, you can pollen is bad this time of year right here in Tennessee. Sorry for the coughing. You can either look at some of my views and say they're good ideals, or you can continue to call me a nut job. Whatever you want to do. It don't matter to me one way or the other, because obviously you haven't listened to me for the past 30 some odd years. I don't know that you're going to listen to me now.
Or were you born free? The new Grand Cherokee.
Jesus. I'm going to take some more freaking Sudafed, I guess.
But that is a shot. .30 in the morning. You'll have to take my word for it, but that is a shot of New York City from the top of our building at 30 Rockefeller Plaza. Ooh, some dense fog, a little bit cool today, and then this weekend going to be close to 95 degrees tomorrow in New York City. The CDC is recommending children aged 5 to 11 receive a 3rd dose of the Pfizer COVID vaccine to boost their immunity. CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky greenlit the recommendation yesterday and encouraged parents of children of that age who have not yet been vaccinated to get their first shot. The recommendation comes amid an uptick in COVID cases and hospitalizations across the country. The FDA says the supply of baby formula should begin to improve now in a matter of days. The first flights of formula from overseas will begin this weekend. A plane from Switzerland carrying 1.5 million bottles of hypoallergenic formula is expected to land in Indiana. The new supply will be distributed across the country. Meanwhile, President Biden soon will sign a bill expanding access to formula for parents who use WIC. the federally funded program for low-income families. The Senate passed that legislation yesterday. Also yesterday, FDA Commissioner Robert Califf was grilled by lawmakers about the formula shortage and the agency's response.
You can't hide behind an investigation. We need answers. We need them now. Who received this report? What did they do with it? Who was heading the FDA at that time? My understanding is that the acting commissioner was Janet Woodcock. What did she know about this? So who was handling all of this when this report went through the FDA and investigating all of this?
Well, that's it. Once more, when you have the blind leading the blind, this is what you run into whenever you have a certain particular crisis. It's kind of like Katrina. Whenever Katrina hit down in the south coast in late 2005, I think it was in September, our government was not set up with FEMA and other emergency source resources to be able to handle something that massive on that level pertaining to that many people's needs. If we don't have smart enough people in local, state, and federal governments that are not smart enough to adapt to various things that today we're having to deal with, that 25, 30, 40, 50 years ago we didn't have to deal with, but now we're dealing with them. If we don't have smart enough people in our offices, we need to get them out, and we need to put people that can adapt to these different resources and these different needs, because if we don't, we're going to be crippled, we're going to be hurt, we're going to be injured, and I don't know that we can recover from such stuff as this. I'm pretty sure, I hate to say it, but I'm pretty sure there's going to be some babies, some infants that are either going to be neglected or possibly even die on the count of somebody did not foresee the emergency status that this needed to be looked upon pertaining to the FDA and the baby formula. Does people need to be held accountable on account of this? I think so. I guarantee if I was up there working for the FDA department and I didn't foresee these things coming around the corner, somebody would question me about my intent. That's one reason why America has taken back seat to so many different things, is because we don't hold these people accountable, regardless whether they be in federal, state, or local government. These people are drawing a check to be working for the benefit of we the people. And if they're drawing a check and they don't know what's going on, if they don't know their behindies to a hole in the ground, somebody needs to fire them or cause them to resign and get somebody in there that does. That's the bottom line, especially whenever it comes to the safety and the prosperity of society.
Well, as I've said, you've got the timeline down and you've got the key issues. I know we have an oversight hearing next week, and we'll be prepared to go into much more detail at that point. And, you know, as I've said, we could do better than we did.
But you have an oversight committee next week. You're before the committee that funds what you do.
Yeah.
So this information is relevant to this subcommittee of appropriations.
Well, I appreciate what you're saying, that the investigation is not completed yet, and so I'm not in a position to answer specifics like that.
So, Katty Kay, wow, there are so many questions at this point. First of all, I'm going to want to know how exactly they're going to distribute the formula that is coming from abroad, how quickly they can make that happen. Is that going to get caught up in red tape and drag out for weeks? Because for some parents, They don't have weeks. The demand is so immediate and it is so desperate, which leads to a lot of other questions. I was talking to my brother about the millions of refugees at the border that are being coordinated and organized through different organizations. The U.S. military and Poland, they don't have a baby formula shortage. Why? Because people foresaw the need and acted accordingly, and it was organic. That was his answer to me. Right here in America, we had a situation that could have been predicted. The shortage was predictable, but yet there's no organic and no real leadership on this that is strong enough to move the meter.
I mean, let's take a step back. The idea that the United States of America is having to import baby formula from Switzerland because mothers are running down to 1 can or even less to try and feed their babies. They literally cannot feed their babies, and this is in 2022. The world's biggest military, the world's biggest economy, can't get baby formula to people. Just seems... frankly, it seems kind of unbelievable. If somebody had told this to me a couple of months ago, I would have never believed that this was going to happen. This headline started cropping up 2 or 3 weeks ago. And 2 or 3 weeks ago, there wasn't very much attention being paid to this. The first stories I saw about it back then, I thought, I hope the White House is on this, because this has the potential to blow up in their faces politically in a very big way. And of course, much more importantly, it is causing huge amounts of stress to parents. So this flight comes in, it comes in from Zurich, it's going to land in Indiana, we understand, and then be distributed around the country. But one flight load, even if it does have millions of doses of formula on it, I think it's something like 19 million doses, bottles worth of formula on it, that's not going to be enough. They're going to have to speed up production. We're now having to rely on the Defense Production Act. I mean, this is what you do when you're trying to fund a war effort or trying to fight COVID, the Defense Production Act. It shouldn't have to be that we are relying on that to increase supplies of baby formula to people, but that's where and it's really interesting what you say about on the border, that the US military having to fund this on the border has managed to sort this out. But bureaucratic red tape in this country and kooky trade systems and suppliers have managed to make this a problem here. They need to sort this out fast, because politically this is toxic for the White House.
So we're going to be talking, Willie, later to Senator Debbie Stabenow, who's passed a bill to try and deal with this crisis. We'll be asking her a lot of questions. Willie?
When you have people that can't see the trees for the forest because they're supposed to be so educated that they have all these scholars and all these degrees, whenever you have professional people that are leading us in these areas of darkness into even deeper darknesses, who's the smart people here? Is it people with the common sense that can foresee these dangers that are looming over not only the American people but the world? I mean, whenever you read the Bible and you see where Christ talked about commotions, uproars, wars, rumors of wars, disturbances, that we will be living in the days of dangerous times, perilous times, lovers of their own flesh, greedy, selfish people that are more greedy and selfish about themselves than they are other people around them. Whenever you can understand the prophecies out of the Bible, and when you have a nation is supposed to be as religious as the American people are, how come we have not made proper advances pertaining to major weather-related natural catastrophe events? Same way with the baby formula. Same way with the electrical battery power cars. You got to put a pencil to these things, and you got to start out ground zero. You got a plan of action. In the auto body industry, we had a memento whenever it come to repairing an automobile that needed to be pulled back in line to get the frame and everything else back in the specs, that you have to have a plan. After you have made a plan, you pull to the plan, you plan to the pull. plan to the pull to the plan. But you got to have a plan. You got to have somebody that's willing to sit down and discuss these things openly, that what if case scenario this occurs? What if case scenario that occurs? You know, has anybody even discussed what if these super heat domes that keeps continually building out west continue to keep affecting the people's water sources out there pertaining to the water reservoirs? What if it gets so desperately low that there's no way for state and local governments to provide bare necessities pertaining to H2O to millions of people out west? What if? Has anybody sat down with a plan of action to say, you know what, we've already got it figured out towards what we're going to do? I ain't heard of no plan. I can see what's going on pertaining to the heat domes out west that keeps intensifying. I think last year the heat dome actually went up into parts of Canada. There's been a year or two, for the past year or two, that Alaska has broken all-time records towards getting up about 90 degrees or 91 degrees or something like that. I think that's an all-time record for that. I mean, we're going to have to sit down if we're going to survive this storm. If we're going to survive these crisisness, we're going to have to sit down with some intelligent people that are smart enough to make plans and reservations for people that are going to be caught up in these type of scenarios, because the Bible says to pray that you're either worthy to escape these things that are going to be befallen upon to the earth pertaining to the woes. Woe be unto the inhabitants is upon to the earth, pertaining to the first woe, second woe, third woe, fourth woe, goes into the woes. Are we going to have people that are smart enough to be able to figure out the what if scenarios, that we still have a plan of action? That way,
let's remember that Abbott plant closed in.
It isn't just total chaos.
A couple of weeks in the
Correct.
making, closed in February, and there were warning signs actually last fall that it was probably going to close based on all the problems they were having there. So this is not something. And yes, Caddy's right. It jumped into the headlines a week or two ago. But for government officials, they should have seen this coming a long time ago. So for the Biden administration, respectfully, to say, you know, we've moved quickly on this, frankly, isn't true.
I think what they're saying is we are moving quickly now, which is a difference. But the problem is politically, but also legitimately for babies across America, this is something that is going to stay with any parent that has to deal with any type of shortage in feeding their baby, the most basic thing. So the hope for the White House, and quite frankly for Democrats, is that they can turn this around, because this will be on them. This will be a terrible, terrible message about the non-functionality of America. If we can't even foresee a crisis of a plant shutting down, one of the only makers of baby formula, which is a problem within itself, and not address that dire need that was right there, right straight down the road. They were looking at it. It's discouraging, to say the least, about the state of affairs in America and the ability to get things done. Let's turn now to a reunion that
It's asinizing.
and the ability to get things done. Let's turn now to a reunion that happened this week in Los Angeles that was more than 70 years in the making.
Do we recognize each other? Judy Khan. It's nice to see you. We look almost the same.
96-year-old Frank Schatz and 101-year-old George Bursey are Holocaust survivors whose paths very likely crossed at a slave labor camp in Hungary back in 1944.
You have to educate the people and never forget those who don't learn from history. They are repeating it. So it is the main reason why both of us are doing it. Not for publicity. I don't get anything out of it. He doesn't. But we are the one who are the last living witnesses.
We are very fortunate
that we remember these historical sites, these historical events, and we can draw some conclusion, and we can draw attention to the present people who are around us, what's happened, and what should we do that this should never ever occur again.
The meeting came about because Frank's niece, Erica Fabian, saw this article in the Los Angeles Times about Bercy, a surgical pioneer who still goes into work several days a week at Cedar Sinai Medical Center in Los Angeles. She read about his experience as a Holocaust survivor, and the journey matched that of her uncles.
I sent it to my uncle thinking they might know each other. So obviously it was important enough for me to take the time to cut the article out, copy it, send it to him, and say, do you know this man? So I am amazed that my uncle immediately contacted Dr. Bertzi, and here they are sitting together. It's, to me, it's a miracle.
The two men are going to take a couple of days to catch up and get acquainted. They say they hope their meeting will remind people about the horrors that took place, but that you can go through hell and still live to tell about it. Witnesses to history. Listen to them. Coming up, we have new reporting on who the accused Buffalo shooter was communicating with moments before the hate-based attack. Plus, Oklahoma takes abortion legislation to the next level, passing what is now the country's most restrictive ban on the procedure. And yesterday, we played for you some eye-opening comments from Georgia voters. We're going to have more from Elise Jordan's focus group of Democrats and Republicans just ahead on Morning Joe.
People wonder how come I bring up the past as much as I do. And a lot of people think that I'm sharpening the axe and wanting to get back at people by saying 90-90 boo-boo. And regardless whether people believe that or not, that really is not my sole intent in bringing up the past. My sole intent for bringing up the past is so that we will not repeat the past by remembering the past. Because a country or a nation or a group of people that don't remember their past has a tendency of repeating it again and again and again. That's the reason why the great scholars or teachers of today says that lessons will be repeated until learned. Well, God does the exact same thing whenever he's trying to corral a herd of people in their lifestyles that is very disapproving of the Heavenly Father, that he'll allow for various things to happen to either that person's life or that community or that state or that nation. He'll allow for these things to happen because he's trying to corral, change, herd the herd in an area that God intends for us to go by. And if we're so hard-headed, we're not going to listen to the examples that's happened in the past, then odds are we're going to repeat them again in the future. Which is absolutely senseless for people to have to learn their lessons the same way that we had to learn ours, or the same way that our ancestors had to learn theirs, because they wouldn't listen to their people before them. Thank you for listening. Good luck to each and every one of us as we end our program by saying we love you, we appreciate you. We want to say God bless America, God bless to our troops, and good luck to each and every one of us in these perilous last days that obviously we are now in. Shalom. And God bless. And thank you for listening and watching.